Hello and welcome back. So in the previous two videos, we have seen what are graphs and how to store graphs. In this video, we will mostly focus on what is known as shortest path problem. We will mainly define so what is the shortest path problem on a graph, both directed and undirected graph. Then we will talk about two algorithms in detail, and we'll also talk about one more algorithm which we will be discussing sometimes later in the course. Okay, let's get started with the shortest path problem. So in this class we are going to talk about shortest paths. So before we start talking about shortest paths, I think we should look at what are paths. Let's look at this example. So we have this graph. I can start with the vertex 0. From the vertex 0, I can take this edge and reach the vertex 1, and from 1 I can, let's say I reach the vertex 3, right? I started with vertex 1, I took the edge and reached 1. From 1 I took the edge and reached 3. So this sequence, this walk is basically called as a path. More formally, path is a sequence of nodes v1, v2, vk, such that if you take any two adjacent vertices in the sequence, there should be an edge. Okay. For example, 0, 1, 3 is a path in the graph. Similarly, you can start with 2, then you can go to you can start with 0, you can go to 2, from 2 you can go to 4, from 4 you can go to 1, and from 1 you can go to 3. So 0, 2, 4, 1, 3 is also a path, because if you take any two consecutive nodes in this path, there is an edge in the graph. So cycle is a path in which the first node is same as the last node, right? So we have the path v1, v2, vk such that any two adjacent nodes, there is an edge between them. If the last vertex vk is same as v1, then we call this as a cycle. For example, if you start with 1, from 1 you can go to 2, from 2 you can go to 4, from 4 you can come back to 1. So the starting vertex here is same as the ending vertex in the path. Such a path is called a cycle in the graph. So the length of the path is defined as the number of edges in the path. For example, the length of 0, 1, 3 is 2. The number of nodes in the path is 3, but what matters for the length is the number of edges in the path. So, okay, so let's try to remember the length of the path is the number of edges in the path. Similarly, when you look at the path 0, 2, 4, 1, 3, so the number of nodes in this path is 3. So the number of edges in this path will be 1 less than the number of nodes in the path, which is 4. So the length of the first path is 2, the length of 0, 2, 4, 1, 3 is 4. So then we can define weight of the path if the graph is a weighted graph. So weight of the path is the sum of the weights of the edges in the path, right? So weight of a path is the sum of the weights in the edges of the path. So weight of the path 0, 1, 3, the edges in the path are 0, 1 and 1, 3. So the weight of the path, the edge 0, 1 is 1. So weight of the edge 1, 3 is 8. So the weight of the path 0, 1, 3 is 1 plus 8, which is 9. Similarly, you can find the weight of the path 0, 2, 4, 1, 3. The weight of the edges are 2, 3, 6 and 8 respectively. If you sum them up, you get 22. So weight of the path is the sum of the weight of the edges in the path. So once you know what is the path, then it's easy to define what's known as the shortest path problem. So I give you two nodes in the path, two nodes in the graph. I wanted to find a shortest weight path. So what is the shortest weight path? Among all the paths between S and T, give me a path with the minimum weight. Okay. So the examples that I have shown is only for the directed graphs, but the same definitions hold true for the undirected graph also. So the shortest path problem exists in both directed as well as undirected graphs. So you can define a path as the sequence of vertices such that if you take any two consecutive nodes in the sequence, there should be an edge between them. Once you define a path, then we can define the weight of the path as the sum of the weights of the edges in the path. Once you define what is the weight of a path, then we are looking for among given two vertices. You consider all the paths between S and T, and once you can enumerate about all the paths from S to T, then you can compute the weight of these individual paths by adding up the weights of the edges in the path. So once you know the weight of each of these paths, give me a path with the minimum weight, right? That's precisely what is a shortest path problem. So in the shortest path problem, we always look for a simple path. Simple path is a path which does not contain a cycle. So for example, so if the path contains a cycle like this, the weight of this path can be positive or it can be negative. So suppose if the weight of this cycle is positive, so if the weight of this cycle is positive, then when you want to go from S to T, instead of going through this cycle, you can skip the cycle. The weight of the path from S to T will be shorter if you skip the cycle, because the weight of the cycle we are assuming that it is positive. So if the so obviously, so a shortest path will never contain a positive cycle. But if the cycle that the shortest path has is negative weight, then you can go along the negative cycle as many number of times that you want. Every time when you go through the cycle, what happens is that the weight of the path keeps decreasing every time you take the cycle, because the weight of the cycle is negative. So the weight of the shortest path is really minus infinity, and the path becomes an infinite path kind of stuff, right? So so if the it's easy to see that a shortest path will never contain a positive cycle, and if it has a negative cycle, then the shortest path problem is not well defined. So if the graph is a negative, if the graph contains a negative weighted cycle, then the shortest path problem is not well defined, because it can go along the cycle as many number of times and reduce the weight of the shortest path. So when I say that we want a shortest path, what we are looking at is a simple path from S to T. So once we define the shortest path, we can also define what is known as a longest path. Among all the paths between S and T, find a path with the maximum weight. So what is known is that we will see three algorithms which are efficient algorithms, solvable in polynomial time, but the longest path problem happens to be NP-hard. What it means is that so there is no polynomial time algorithm known to find the longest path problem, right? So it's a kind of intuition is that there's something called a Hamiltonian path problem. So a Hamiltonian path problem in a graph is that you want to find a simple path which connects all the nodes, right, of the graph exactly once. So given a graph, we want to know whether there is a simple path which has all the vertices in it. So it's easy to see that if you can answer the longest path problem, then the graph will have a path of length n, simple path of length n minus 1, if and only if the graph has a Hamiltonian path in the graph, right? So because the longest path will have a length n minus 1, longest simple path will have a length n minus 1. So if the graph has a path of length n minus 1, then that is a Hamiltonian path. But if the longest path itself is of length smaller than n minus 1, then such a graph cannot have a Hamiltonian path in the graph. So if you can answer the longest path problem in polynomial time, then we have solved the Hamiltonian path problem in polynomial time. So what we do is that you call the longest path problem. If the length of the path is n minus 1, then you know that that's an Hamiltonian path. And if the length of the longest path is strictly smaller than n minus 1, then the graph cannot have a Hamiltonian path in the graph. So, but it's well known that the Hamiltonian path is a problem is an NP-hard problem, which also implies that the finding the longest path, simple path in a graph is also NP-hard. So it's interesting to see that the shortest path problem is polynomial time, but the longest path problem is not solvable in polynomial time. It happens to be NP-hard. So what I want you to do is to think why this is really the case. We will see two main algorithms in this course, in this lectures, and sometimes later in some videos we are going to learn what is known as Weierstrass algorithm. So these are efficient algorithms to find the shortest paths. So when you studied these algorithms, what we have to also see if you can modify these algorithms to get longest paths, why it is not possible to modify these algorithms into get longest path longest path problem. And in general, so why is that it's not possible to solve the longest path problem in polynomial time, but it's always possible to solve the shortest path problem in polynomial time. This is something that you should keep thinking about as and when we discussed the shortest path problem. So the first quick thing that we want to see is that so you can't do a brute force kind of algorithm. So what's a brute force kind of algorithm? So when you want to find a shortest path between S and T, you find out all the paths from S to T. If all the paths from S to T happens to be polynomial, then what I could have done is I enumerate all the paths from S to T, find the weight of individual paths and keep track of the min and maximum. So this would have given me an efficient polynomial time algorithm for solving both shortest path problem as well as the longest path problem. So what I want to quickly show an example here saying that the number of possible paths between a source and a destination can be exponential in the number of nodes as well as the number of edges in the graph. So you can't try to enumerate all the paths in the graph, so that becomes an exponential time algorithm. Let's quickly look at this example. I have a source vertex which is in this end. I want to go from the source vertex to the destination, which is T. So there are k blocks. Each block, so what you see is that there is an S here. So this is the block 1. So there are 4 vertices in this block. From this vertex I can either go up and reach this vertex or come down and reach this vertex. From here either of these vertices I can come here. So from here I can either go up or I can come down. Okay, so there is a k such blocks. So what is easy to see that if you want to reach the end of the first block, that is this point, there are 2 paths. So one is up or down, right? So you first take the up and then you come down, or you can come down. After that there is only one way, right? So each of these functions you have 2 options, either to go up or go down and reach this destination. So we can call it as up path and down path. But when you want to reach the end of the second block, that is this vertex, so you can see that there are 4 paths from S to this vertex. The paths are either you can go up and then again go up, or in the first block you can go up, but in the second block you can come down, right? Or you can come down in the first block but go up in the second block, or come down and again take a down path in the second block. So this is up down, down up, down, right? So there are 4 different paths from the source vertex to the end of the second block. Similarly, if you continue with this argument, you see that so from S to T the number of paths is 2 to the power k. So k is the number of blocks here, and you know that the number of paths in this simple graph is 2 to the power k, where k is the number of blocks here. But how many vertices are there in this graph and how many nodes are there in this graph? It's possibly easy to count the number of nodes in edges in the graph because there are k blocks and each block has 4 edges in the graph. So the total number of edges in the graph is 4 into m. So how do you count the number of nodes in the graph? So what we do is that for the first block, you will count only the first three vertices and ignore the. So we will count this vertex, this vertex, and this vertex. And for the second block, we will count this vertex and this vertex and this vertex. For every block, I am going to consider the first three vertices that you see in the diagram. So in the k vertices, when you consider k blocks, you would have seen 3k vertices and the last vertex will be left. So the number of nodes in this graph is 3k plus 1. Number of edges is 4k. So, but the number of paths from S to T is 2 to the power k. So if you want to write k in terms of m and n, so what you can read this statement as the number of paths from S to T is 2 to the power m by 4, or you can also read it as the number of paths from S to T is 2 to the power n minus 1 by 3. So, so what this essentially means is that the number of paths, it is possible that in a given graph, the number of paths between a source and a destination can be exponential. So we should never try to enumerate all the paths and try to hope to get a polynomial time or efficient algorithm to compute the shortest path problem. So what we want is a shortest path between S and T, but when you look at the algorithms, there are two kinds of algorithms. One is known as the single source shortest path problem. So in the single source shortest path problem, so you're given a source and this algorithm will find the shortest path to every other node in the graph. And the other variant that we are going to see is that all-pair shortest path, that is find the shortest path between every pair of nodes in the graph. So if you have a solution for the single source shortest path problem, one way to solve the all-pair shortest path problem is just to call the algorithm m number of times with different sources varying over all the nodes of the graph. But we will see that calling the all pair shortest path will be much efficient than calling single source shortest path n number of times in some cases. Okay. So, but we wanted to find the shortest path from S to T, right? So, but we are talking about single source shortest path, which will find the shortest path from every this particular source vertex to every other node. So when it finds shortest paths to every other node, it also finds the shortest paths to T. But the single source shortest path is probably doing much more than so what is required for me, right? So I want to go from Electronic City to airport. I want to find what is the shortest path. So I am interested in the specific source and specific destination. But what we will end up computing is what is the shortest path from the source to every other vertex in the graph. So we are doing much more than what is required, but so when you want to solve the single source, single destination shortest path problem, so what you end up doing is calling the single source shortest path problem, right? So there is no asymptotically better algorithm even if you are interested in only one destination. So what you end up calling is the single source, the shortest path problem. So what I'm going to show you next is the three algorithms, two for the single source shortest path and one for the all pair shortest path. And in this course, we are only going to describe, study in detail one of the single source shortest path problem. But the other two algorithms are very simple to implement, very simple to see and implement and also compute their complexity. But what is not very obvious is that why these algorithms work correctly. So we will not focus on so the correctness of these algorithms for time being. So we'll come back to this at some time later point of time. In the single source shortest path problem, the efficient algorithm is called Dijkstra's algorithm. But unfortunately, this works only when all the weights in the graph are positive. And this fails to compute the shortest path correctly if the graph has negative weights. And the complexity of this algorithm will be order v plus v log v, and this uses adjacency list representation of the graph. But if you want to find the single source shortest path problem, if the weights are all positive, then you end up using Dijkstra's algorithm, which is the most efficient algorithm. But if the graph has negative weights, then you cannot use Delsa's algorithm. Then there's an algorithm called due to Bellman and Ford, which is called Bellman-Ford algorithm, which computes the shortest path between SOs with every other vertex in the graph in order in time order V into E, where V is the number of nodes and E is the number of edges in the graph. And interestingly, this uses edge list representation. Then the last one that you have is the Alpine shortest path due to Floyd and Warshall. This computes the shortest path between every pair of nodes in order n cube. And this uses the adjacency matrix representation because you want to store the weight of the shortest path between any two pair of vertices. So the amount of space that is required is order n square. So in order to store the answer as is order n square, so you can as well store the actual graph in order n square space. So important to note, if the Alpine shortest path can be solved, not described by Dijkstra now. So we'll come back to the details of Dijkstra in the next few videos. So I'll quickly show the Bellman-Ford algorithm and the Floyd-Warshall's algorithm. It's easy to understand the algorithms. It's only a few lines of code, and it's also easy to tell you that the Bellman-Ford algorithm is order V into E, and the Floyd-Warshall's algorithm is order n cube. So what's not easy is that why does these algorithms work correctly? So we will not get into the correctness of these algorithms. We should come back to these two algorithms, to the correctness of these algorithms when you study a technique called dynamic programming. So which we're not planning to do it for time being. So we'll come back to the correctness after we study so the technique called dynamic programming. So let's look at the Bellman-Ford algorithm. So what we said is that it uses the edge list representation. See, every node in the edge in the linked list will have three parameters, that is I comma j, and a floating value which is floating point value which is w, which is the weight of the edge from I to j. This is the structure of the edge list that we are going to use. So the main idea of the Bellman-Ford is that at any point of time you just stare at an edge I to j. So we have dj. So d of j is the weight of the shortest path from the source vertex s to j. So when you want to compute the shortest path to j, and there is an edge which is going from I to j. So you just look at the weight of the shortest path from s to I, right? So that is stored in s d of I. And take the path from I to j. Okay. See, if the shortest path that you have right now is bigger than the weight of the path from s to I plus weight of this edge, then we have discovered a better path from s to j. So in that case, you update your shortest path from s to j as d of j is equal to d of I plus d of I plus weight of this particular edge. So this edge has to be checked for every edge. Make this updation, and in one pass, what you do is that you consider all the edges. You can consider all the edges in any order. So that's why we are starting with the edge list representation of the graph. And when you pick a edge, so there are two endpoints, I and j. You find the shortest path to j. That is the shortest path to j. Check whether that is greater than the shortest path to I plus weight of this edge. If the d of j is bigger than d of I plus weight of this edge, just update d of j to I plus d of I plus weight of this edge. Just repeat this for n number of times. So the claim is that what I have at the end of this algorithm, so d of i's will be the length of the shortest path from s to I. So the code for this is looks very simple. So what it does is that let's look at this is the Bellman-Ford. What's given to you is the graph in the edge list representation, and there is an shortest distance. You're going to store the answers in this array, and n is the number of nodes in the graph, and s is the source vertex. So in this graph, you want to find the shortest distance from S to every other vertex in the graph. So what I first said is the shortest distance from the starting vertex S to itself is 0, but the shortest distance from S to every other vertex is set as int infinity. So now when I go inside the loop, what I am doing is that I am just basically going through every edge in the graph. See, every edge in the graph is my temp is the edge list. Every time when I go inside the outer for loop, so what I do is that I initialize my temp to be at the edge list. I look at every node in the edge list. So this is an edge which is going from I to j. So when I look at an edge which is going from I to j, what I do is that I look at what is the shortest distance to j vertex, whether this is greater than the shortest distance to I plus the weight of the current edge. If the shortest distance to j is greater than the shortest distance to I plus weight of this edge, then I update my shortest distance to j to be shortest distance to I plus the weight of this edge. Then I go to the next edge and repeat this process. The inner while loop will consider every edge exactly once and tries to update the shortest path to its endpoint. So this algorithm repeats this n number of times. So once it repeats n number of times, so S of d's that you have is the weight of the shortest path from S to I. So it's easy to see that this algorithm is order n into m, because the inner while loop will run m number of times. For every edge will be considered exactly once, so you go through the edge list exactly once. So the inner while loop will run m number of times, but the for loop will run n number of times. So the complexity of this Bell-Munford algorithm is n into m. Let's look at what happens in the Farber-Warshal's algorithm. So you want to try to update the shortest path from I to j. So you take k as one of the intermediate nodes. Okay. So you are trying to update the shortest path from I to j, and k is one of the intermediate nodes along this path. Now you try to ask the question whether the shortest path that you have from I to j is it better than the shortest path from I to k plus the shortest path from k to j. In other words, when I want to go from I to j, does it make sense in visiting the vertex k and then going to the vertex j? If the weight of the shortest path that you have currently is greater than weight of the shortest path from I to k and plus the weight of the shortest path from k to j, then you update your shortest path from I to j to be weight of the shortest path from I to k plus weight of the shortest path from k to j. This is precisely what it does, enumerating over all possible values of I, j and k. So algorithm is simple. So what you have is that you're given a matrix in the adjacency matrix representation. You're trying to compute the all pair shortest paths. You want to, at the end of the day, you want to find the weight of the shortest path between every pair of nodes, and the number of nodes here is n. So we initialize d of I comma j to be a of I comma j. So if there is only one edge, then the weight of the path is exactly equal to the weight of the edge that you have. After that, all the diagonal entries we make it as 0. So because when you want to reach I from j, I from I, the length of the shortest path is exactly equal to 0. Now for k is equal to 0 to n, I is equal to 0 to n, j is equal to 0 to n. What I check is that whether the shortest path from I to j is greater than the shortest path from I to k plus the shortest path from k to j. If the shortest path from I to j is greater than the shortest path from I to k plus the shortest path from k to j, then I update my shortest path from I to j to be weight of the shortest path from I to k plus the weight of the shortest path from k to j. So this is precisely what this algorithm does. You can see that there are exactly 3 for loops, and so the complexity of this algorithm is order n cube. Implementing this algorithm is simple, so few lines of code, and it's also easy to see that this algorithm takes theta of n cube time. So what is not immediately clear is that why this algorithm always computes the shortest path correctly. So which we will skip for time being. As I mentioned earlier, we'll come back to the correctness of this algorithm when we study, after we study the technique called dynamic programming. So it's probably better to pause for a minute, and this code looks very similar to the matrix multiplication. So if you look at the matrix multiplication code, so given two matrices A and B, you want to find a resultant matrix which is C. So you will write three loops, and you write C of I comma j is equal to A of I comma k into B of k comma j, right? So you keep updating your C of I comma j to be C of I comma j plus D of I comma k, sorry, A of I comma k into B of k comma j. So there is a lot of similarity between this and the matrix multiplication. So there you multiply and keep updating. Here what we are doing is that instead of multiplying, we are adding, and instead of adding, we are basically taking care of the minimum, right? If the d of I comma j is actually greater, then you are updating it with d of minimum of d of I comma j with d of I comma k and k comma j. So one of the questions that I probably want to ask you is that if you write the matrix multiplication, you probably know that there are three loops, so you can write the loops in any order. Okay, you still get the matrix multiplication correctly. So can you do that here? So can you bring in the k loop inside and still retain the inner if loop as we have right now? So in other words, first we'll write the I loop, then comes j loop, and then comes k loop. Or you could write I, k, j, any of the loops, but what you have written inside will remain the same. So if you rewrite the code exchanging this for loops, in the case of matrix multiplication, you know that you get the correct multiplication, but in this case, do you still get the shortest distances correctly? This is something that you should think about and see whether you understand the Bellman-Floyd version correctly. So just so in order to answer this question, so you have to go back to this. So what this tries to do is that so when you want a shortest path from I to j, so yeah, this I am trying to look at enumerate over what are the intermediate vertices that it can visit. So if I want to go from I to j, k is an intermediate vertex. So I want to go to j, and then when I want to go from I to j, I go to vertex k, and then from k I go to j, right? So this is what you need to keep track when you try to answer this question. The summary is that we have seen three algorithms, two for single source shortest path, one is Dijkstra and another one is Bellman-Ford. Dijkstra you can use, it's very efficient, but you can only use that when there are only positive weights, and so the Bellman-Ford V is order n into m, and we have also seen the Floyd-Warshall which is order n cube, but it will compute the all-page shortest paths. And this is also a good example because these three different algorithms uses three different data structures, right? So namely the adjacency matrix, adjacency list, and edge list representations. So in this we have computed the, if you noticed, what we have computed is the weight of the shortest path in these algorithms. But as I said, if you want to find the shortest paths, not just the weight of the shortest paths, then these algorithms can be easily modified by adding few more details to these algorithms. We shall skip these details for time being, but you will learn the tricks to update, learn the trick to do this in the due course of time. So in this video we defined so what are known as shortest path problems, and we said that the shortest path problems are solvable in polynomial time, but the longest path problem is not solvable in polynomial time, it's NP hard. So I want all of you to sit back and think why is that shortest path problems are easy to solve but not the longest path problems. Maybe since you have seen two algorithms, one is the Bellman-Ford algorithm and the Floyd-Warshall algorithm, So can we just exchange the inequalities from greater than to smaller than and try to get the longest path? Why does the algorithm doesn't work? For example, in the case of Bellman-Ford, what we said is the distance to j, if it is greater than distance to I plus the weight of the edge that we are considering now, we are updating the shortest path. We can do the reverse. If the shortest path to j is smaller than the shortest path to I plus weight of the edge, then I can always replace the longer path with d of I plus weight of the edge. Similarly, when we discussed the Five-Warshall algorithm, when we considered the path from I to j, which goes through the vertex k, we saw whether the new path that goes through the j has the shortest length. In that case, we updated the shortest path. We could do the reverse. If the path through k has a weight bigger than the weight of the path from I to j, I could replace the path. Right? So it's easy to convert the greater than symbol into smaller than symbol and try to see whether we get the longest path. Right? So since I mentioned that longest path problems are NP hard, so when we say longest path or shortest path, we are looking for a path which is simple. That means that it doesn't contain cycles. So important to think about why this method works for the shortest path but not the longest path. But in general, why is it possible to solve shortest path problems in polynomial time but not the longest path problem? Okay, so keep thinking about this and come back to the next video.